Hello everyone, welcome to the part 4 video of NCERT as it is review on metallurgy. Now those who are looking at this video, right, can also take a look at the previous 3 parts so that you will have the continuity of the discussion. Now in this part, right, what we are going to be doing is we will start with the discussion about the electrochemical principles in metallurgy. So in the previous 2 parts, right, we've been focusing on the thermodynamic principles. Now we look at the electrochemical principles. And then we will also take a look at some of the other examples of the metal extraction, including, a little bit of beyond the NCERT also, but whatever is very important for JEE or a NEET examination. Then we'll talk about the idea of refining of metals, and then the last part is the little bit of discussion on alloys. In fact, in our channel we have a detailed video on what are all the, I think we have covered around 50 alloys or something, where we talked about what is the composition of the alloy as well as what are some of the important uses of these alloys. That video will provide even broader coverage in terms of the different types of alloys. But here, whatever is limited given in the NCERT, we will try to cover that. By the look of it, it might see that we are going to cover a lot, but what is the difference is in our previous videos, right, we have got some new ideas or new concepts like Ellingham diagram and all that. But here you will see that a lot of it will be kind of straightforward. Even these the electrochemical principles also, right, we have already covered this in our electrochemistry. If you look at refining of the metals or even alloys, right, that is going to be mostly in memory based area, in the sense so whatever questions that will come, right, will be probably based on the memory, like how like say if they are giving a question on what is the composition of brass or what is the composition of the bronze, we can answer it if we know what is the mixture that is present in the alloy. That is the reason why we classify them as what memory based question areas. We will see one by one. Okay, so first we will begin with the electrochemical principles of metallurgy. This is basically, you have a, say for example, reduction. Ultimately in the when we want to get the metal out of the concentrated ore, right, we have to perform the reduction. In the previous videos, we have actually talked about 2 categories of metals. One is the less reactive category. There what happens, self reduction. While we have examples like copper, mercury and lead, we have in our NCERT coverage we have copper, self reduction. Then we have seen the medium reactive metals like our iron or zinc. Here we will have the coke reduction. Now by passing current through a molten solution of the ore, right, we will be able to reduce the metal, and that is what we will be calling as the electrolytic reduction. That will be done for highly reactive metals, because coke or a carbon monoxide cannot reduce these metals. We have aluminum, sodium, magnesium, all these are what examples of the highly reactive metals. But before we go and discuss about the aluminum, right, we will look at the basic, how do we analyze the reduction from the electrochemical point of view. Now when you are looking at the basic relation between the electrode potential and the del G naught, because so we are referring to standard conditions. The equation, this is what we will get from electrochemistry, right? What is the equation? Del G naught will be equal to what? Minus the NF E naught, which means if we want to have a spontaneous process, for that del G naught must be what? Negative. If del G naught must be negative, so look at this, if this has to be negative means what? Minus minus gets cancelled. Our E naught reduction potential must be what? Positive. For the reduction to happen spontaneously. But we know in case of metals, what is the story? Where do metals appear in the electrochemical series? We know the electrochemical series, right? Where do metals come? Metals come at the bottom. They'll come below the standard hydrogen electrode, She. So our reference is what? For the standard hydrogen electrode, it is 0 electrode potential under standard conditions. Below that they will come means all our sodium, magnesium, aluminum, all of them they will come below. Means what? The E naught value for the metals is going to be what? It will be negative. If E naught negative means what? Look at this in terms of the delta G. If you put E naught negative, right, minus minus becomes what? Positive. So which means delta G is coming positive means what? It is a non-spontaneous process. So that is the reason what we say in the electrochemical series, right? Elements at the top, they will easily undergo reduction, like our fluorine, etc. Elements at the bottom, which are metals, right? They will not be able to easily undergo reduction. In fact, very difficult for them to undergo reduction. And what we'll also see is the more reactive metals, right? They will have large negative values for the electrode potential. They will come at the very bottom. And hence what? Their reduction is going to be that much more difficult. But then, how do we achieve the reduction of metal oxide? In our discussion during the thermodynamic principles, right? What is it that we have seen? We use a suitable substance. We call it as what? Reducing agent. So remember, just to bring us up to speed, what is the thing that is there? A metal oxide. It has to undergo a reduction. Means for this delta G will be positive. We have a reducing agent. If say for example we have a reducing agent which will undergo oxidation, and this is giving us large negative value of del G. When you add up both these, because they will happen together, right? When we say reduction of the metal oxide, it is not just reduction. It is happening along with the reducing agent forming its oxide. It's a redox reaction. If you add up both these, right, the del G for the overall reaction is becoming what? It will become negative. That is what will make it spontaneous. And that is how we will choose the reducing agent also. So all that we have discussed before. So here in the language of electrochemistry, how do we speak? Say for example, we will take an example and discuss it now. If you have say copper ions, they can be displaced from the solution by iron. So you see what is happening? Copper is getting reduced, iron is getting what? Oxidized. Now for this to be feasible, this is a redox couple. For this to be feasible, right, what is the E naught value of the cell? If you look at it like a electrochemical cell, right, the E naught value for the cell will be what? It will be E naught of the RHS, which is the cathode part, minus E naught of the LHS, which is the anode part. So the overall redox reaction, for this to be feasible, right, the overall cell E naught must be what? It must be coming positive. So it is not about the reduction potential of copper or reduction potential of iron. What is it? It is about when you have a redox reaction happening, the overall cell EMF that has to be coming positive. And we know for that, right, this cathode reduction potential minus anode reduction potential, that value must be coming as what? Positive. So here, why are we able to see that iron is able to reduce copper. Basically, reducing means what? Iron is able to displace copper ions from their solution. Means what? Iron ions, like say for example, we have copper sulfate. In that we are putting some iron small pieces. What is going to happen? It will be forming iron sulfate and copper will be getting deposited. So iron is able to displace copper ions from their solution. Now for this, right, the feasibility is decided based on what? The E naught value of the cell reaction. So for the redox couple, the E naught value must be what? Positive. So that is how we will have to choose the suitable. So here, we don't want to call it as a reducing agent as such, but what we will say is the overall feasibility will be dependent upon what? The E naught value of the redox couple. That should be coming positive. If E naught positive means what? Let's just go back. E naught positive means what? Del G naught is equal to minus NF E naught, right? So E naught positive means the overall del G naught will be what? Coming negative. That is what we want, no? So it's not like the analysis based on thermodynamic principles and analysis based on the electrochemical principles is different, because we have seen in electrochemistry chapter also they are interlinked. Just like for a cell, right, the E naught value of the cell is related to the del G naught value of the cell reaction. What is the relation? Del G naught is equal to minus NF E naught. So in this case, right, what is this N? It is the number of electrons exchanged, and we know what is F. F is what? Faraday's constant. Okay, so all that is related to the electrochemistry. Anyway, we have studied quite a lot about it there, but here just the idea of how do we identify the feasibility. For feasibility, if you see the reaction, overall reaction like a redox couple reaction, for that the E naught value of the redox couple should be what? Positive. That's it. Now when you are performing simple electrolysis means what? Take an electrolytic cell. So where do we perform the electrolysis? Inside the electrolytic cell. Okay, so we'll have the negative electrode and we'll have the positive electrode. I mean, don't think about the sizes. I mean, it just came by the representation, but it's not like one will be large and other will be small. Not like that. Okay, the negative electrode, right, we'll be calling it as what? Cathode. The positive electrode will be calling it as what? Anode. Inside the electrolytic cell, right, we will have either molten fused state of an ionic compound, or we have a solution. What we will see is that when we are doing the electrolysis, right, the metal cations will move towards what is the principle in electrolysis? What is the principle? Cations will move towards the cathode, anions will move towards the anode. So when the cations move towards the cathode is what? Negative. Their positive charge will be what? Lost. So where it will be lost? It will be lost at the negative electrode, which is the cathode. And once the charge is lost, right, they will be deposited there. So whenever we do any simple electrolysis, right, where the metals will be formed, metals will be deposited in the cathode. But we will see in some cases, right, we will have to take some precautions and all that. But sometimes, right, we will also take the help of some substances which we call as a flux. Now in the case of iron extraction, copper extraction, we have used flux in a different context, the word flux. But here the flux, right, is added for making the molten mass more conducting. Because here for the electrolysis to happen better, right, the molten mass or the solution that we have should have better conductivity, and we will see that some substances they can be added to enhance the conductivity. So here we will have the example of aluminum, the electrolytic reduction of aluminum we will have. In that we will see what are these substances that are added to enhance the conductivity. We will see. Okay, so once we go to the discussion, we will be able to understand. So look at this. This is what is the electrolytic reduction of aluminum, that entire setup. So the purified Al2O3, right? Because remember in the I think first video we talked about the leaching. Leaching using what? Sodium hydroxide, where we will be able to remove the impurities. What are the impurities we will have? We will have SiO2, we will have iron oxide. So the impurities, right, from the bauxite, they will be removed. So what do we call that process? In fact, so we are not given the name. We will be calling it as what? Bayer's process. That is the leaching for the getting of purified Al2O3. Now this Al2O3 is mixed with two substances. Look at them. One is Na3AlF6. What do we call it as? Cryolite. So Na3 AlF6 is what? Cryolite. And we have calcium fluoride. Okay. So what is the role of these two substances? One, they will lower the melting point of the mix. Generally the alumina, right, it will have a higher melting point. Because if you want to remember, ionic compounds, they will not conduct in the solid state. They will only conduct in the molten state. So we should have the alumina getting into the molten state. So for it to be getting into molten state, we should be able to melt it. The normal melting point of alumina will be considerably high. By using these cryolite and CaF2, right, we will be able to lower the melting point of the mix. In fact, so that is little bit additional information. I will show that also, what exactly happens. And also, they will be enhancing the conductivity, the use of these two substances. So here, in fact, if you exactly look at it, right, the mixture that we are taking as electrolyte in the electrolytic cell, what is it? It's 20% alumina. In fact, the cryolite is acting as a solvent that is going to dissolve the alumina. So look at the functions of these two substances we are adding. Cryolite, right, it helps in reducing the melting temperature of the mixture. Same the fluorspar also. What is fluorspar? It reduces the melting temperature. Normally, look at what is the melting point of Al2O3, 2050. So it is reduced to what? Just 900 degrees Celsius. Now we have to understand this in the context of the industry. When you have to maintain something at almost double the temperature, is going to be costing that much more. So when you reduce it to just 900, it will be able to save a lot of fuel cost. Okay, that is one advantage of using fluorspar. And also the fluorspar, right, it will improve the electrical conductivity. And the cryolite, it will act as a solvent that will basically dissolve. So you can see in terms of the amount also, right, what is the one that is major? It is the cryolite, 20% alumina and 20% fluorspar. So that is the molten mixture that you have. And just looking at it, right, the other parts of the electrolytic cell are graphite rods are used as the anode. Okay, and the cathode, while in some textbook you may say a steel cathode, iron. The cathode is basically, we have an iron on which there will be a carbon lining. So the cathode is what? An iron on which there is a carbon lining. You can see here clearly there is what? A carbon lining is there. And the anode is what? Graphite. So the graphite anode is there, and the carbon lining on the iron, right, that will be acting as the cathode. So we will see the overall reaction, right. There is an overall reaction, but we will have to just go and understand how the overall reaction is coming. This process, right, of doing the electrolysis is what we will be referring as the Hall-Hérold process. So some of these names might be relevant, like in case of aluminum extraction, which of the processes is not related? Like that they can ask question. We have Bayer's process. What is Bayer's process? The leaching using sodium hydroxide. Then we have Hall-Hérold process. Then we also have Hoop's process. for the refining of the aluminum, but that is not there given in the NCERT. Okay, that's why we don't cover it. But this is how we will set up the electrolytic cell. Now, what happens is once we start passing current through the molten solution, the electrolysis will start happening. What will be the outcome of the electrolysis? The cations, Al3 plus ions, right? They will be getting reduced at the cathode. You can see what is the cathode reaction. Al3 plus is converting to what? Aluminum. And at the anode, in this Al2O3, what is the anion part? It is the oxide ion. At the anode, right, the oxide ions should undergo what? Oxidation. But what happens is the oxygen that is getting formed will be combining with the what is this carbon representing? This is the graphite. The graphite of the anode, right? The oxygen is going to readily combine with the graphite of the anode, and thereby it can give both CO as well as CO2. Now, why we will purposefully? Because it is consuming the graphite rods, right? Means what? Look at it, no. So it is consuming these graphite rods. After some time, we will have to replace them. Then only the further electrolysis can happen. But still, why we are allowing this to happen is, where is the aluminum metal getting formed? It is getting formed inside this cell itself, right? And we know very well that aluminum has got a very strong affinity for oxygen. The oxygen that is getting liberated here, if you do not have the graphite anode, the nascent oxygen that is not converted into another form, what can happen? That oxygen might again combine with the freshly prepared aluminum. So that is the danger. So we want to avoid it. That's the reason why we are choosing selectively. We know that graphite rods will be consumed. The oxygen liberated, right, at the anode will react with the graphite, means what? Carbon. It will react with the carbon of the anode, and that will produce what? CO and CO2. In fact, if you look at the exact, maybe sometimes this question also can be asked. Each kg of aluminum produced, right, that will be requiring what? 0.5 kg of carbon at the anode to be burnt away. Burnt away means through this oxidation that is happening. Now, if you look at just the formation of CO2, we will be able to get the overall reaction. So remember, the overall reaction that we talked about. Overall reaction is what? The reaction which mentions the aluminum getting reduced along with the carbon of the anode, right, that is getting oxidized towards CO2. This is the balanced. In fact, this balanced equation also we should keep in mind. I think in one of the previous year NEET they have asked. Normally also we can balance it off. It's not a major thing, but just the idea. So what is it? Al2O3 plus the carbon of the anode, right, graphite anode. That will give us what? Aluminum plus CO2. So look at the balanced. 2 moles of Al2O3 will combine with 3 moles of carbon to give us what? 4 moles of aluminum metal plus 3 moles of CO2 gas. Even if it is not balanced, means we can easily balance it up. That's not a major thing. Okay. But just the idea of the overall equation, that is also important. Okay. So this is about the electrolytic reduction of aluminum. So why we are doing electrolytic reduction? Because a normal coke reduction or a CO reduction cannot be happening, because aluminum is a highly reactive metal. Same we can do the similar process for the magnesium also. We can do the similar process for sodium also. Because we are discussing about the aluminum, right? Sometimes already in the first video we have seen some of the ores of the aluminum. Like we're talking about the bauxite. Okay, which is what? Hydrated aluminum oxide. We also have gibbsite. What is gibbsite? Al2O3.3H2O. We have diaspore. What is it? Al2O3.H2O. Then we have just the anhydrous Al2O3. What do we call it as? Corundum. Then we have alunite. What is it? Potassium sulfate aluminum sulfate and aluminum hydroxide. In case of the fluoride type of ore, right, we have cryolite. Already we have seen this, Na3LF6. Then in the aluminate type, right, we have what? Spinel. What is it? MgO.Al2O3. Then in the silicates type, we have what? Feldspar. I think, even we have mentioned about it in our first video. What is it? Potassium aluminum. So K2O, Al2O3 dot 6SiO2. Then we have, of course, kaolinite. What is it? It is a type of a clay. So this is how we will be able to look at some of the examples of the ores of aluminum. But the principal ore is what? Bauxite. So bauxite, we will leach the pure Al2O3 by performing Bayer's process, leaching by using sodium hydroxide. Then Hall-Héroult process for the electrolytic reduction. Then we also have a Hoops process for the refining, but we don't have this in the NCERT coverage, so we'll just not cover it. Now for the copper, right, we already have seen one reduction method. What is it? The self-reduction. But sometimes copper can be also present in the low-grade ore forms. So copper can be extracted from its low-grade ore by using what we call as a hydrometallurgy. I'll tell you why the name hydrometallurgy also come. So what is this hydrometallurgy concept? The solution containing the copper ions, right, it will be treated with either a scrap iron or even H2. Because we are using H2, right, that's why the word hydrometallurgy has come. Remember one thing, the hydrogen, it will come, where does it come? In terms of the electrochemical series, generally what do we see? All the metals will be below the hydrogen. But where the copper will come, copper will actually come above the hydrogen in terms of the electrochemical series. So this is the hydrogen, copper will be above, which means what? Hydrogen can displace copper out of its solution. So you can see what happens, H2 can displace copper ions from the solution. So thereby what we will get? We will get copper in the solid form. Same way, I mean, we can use hydrogen. We can also use scrap iron, because iron is also more reactive than copper. Already we have seen it, right? So iron will be able to displace the copper. In fact, any of the other more reactive, zinc also can be used theoretically. But we even have a question. Look at this. Low grade copper ore is available. Zinc and iron scraps are also available. Which of the two scraps would be suitable for the reducing of the leaching? Zinc, if you look at the position in the electrochemical series, right, in terms of the reactivity, zinc is what is it? More reactive than iron. Which means what? The reduction is going to be more feasible. I mean, here we are using the word more faster, but rather we should actually use the word more feasible. So the reduction by zinc will be more feasible than reduction by iron. But both the cases we can have the reduction. But when it comes to the cost aspect, right, zinc is costlier metal than the iron. So remember, always it's about the cost when you're doing something at the industry level. So hence, we will rather prefer using iron than using zinc. But what will be a more favorable reaction? It will be reduction by using zinc. But since we also tag the cost aspect, right, zinc is more costly. So we will be using iron scraps because it will be cost effective. That's it. So this is about the hydrometallurgy. What is the basic idea? Copper can be displaced from its solution by any metal which is higher in terms of the reactivity. And here, why are we specifically using the word hydrometallurgy? Because even hydrogen can displace copper from its solution. Okay. Now, when we look at the metallurgy rate, all the while we have been talking about what? Reduction. It's always about the metals. But I think in the first video itself, I might have said why we call the chapter as metallurgy, because while in the name as per the NCERT, right, what do we say? Principles of, the isolation and separation of elements. But our focus is mostly on the metals. And this is the only section, right, where we also talk about the non-metals. In case of non-metals, what happens? When you want to extract them, because non-metals, right, you take any non-metal, like say for example, let's talk about chlorine. Chlorine is already in the negative state, means a non-metal has to be oxidized. Okay, so to get the corresponding substance, metals have to be reduced, because metals are usually in the oxidation state, positive, right, so they have to be reduced. Non-metals are generally in the negative oxidation state, they have to be oxidized. So we'll see how the extraction of chlorine from brine solution. In fact, this is a process that we study in our +1 S block elements. Brine solution is what? It's a dilute solution of sodium chloride. Okay. When we do the electrolysis of this, what happens is the overall reaction. This is the overall reaction. At the anode, the chloride ions will undergo oxidation. At the cathode, right, the water will be undergoing the reduction, because in the solution, right, what we'll have in brine solution means we'll be having what? Na plus, Cl minus, and of course there will be water. Now, anode, the Cl minus will undergo what? Oxidation. At cathode, a reduction has to happen. We have Na plus, but Na plus, the reduction potential is what? Less. So Na plus will not, less means when comparison with water, Na plus will not undergo reduction. Water will undergo the reduction, as you can see here. The overall reaction is what? When water is undergoing reduction, it will be giving us what? The OH minus and H2. So this H2 will be coming at the cathode and Cl2 will be coming at the anode. So when you perform the electrolysis of the brine solution, along with that, inside what is left now, we have OH minus and Na plus is already there. So we will be having what? Sodium hydroxide, also the caustic soda. So when you perform the electrolysis of brine solution, right, we will get what? Chlorine at the anode, hydrogen at the cathode. But importantly, what is there inside the solution now? Caustic soda, sodium hydroxide is there. So this is a method to prepare the caustic soda. But when you look at this in terms of the electrochemical principles, right, the overall reaction that we are seeing, it is still having a E naught value of minus 2.2, the overall reaction, redox couple. Redox couple is having what? A E naught value of minus 2.2. So how do we get it? Like, if you look at the overall reaction, del G naught is what? Plus 422. If you put in this equation, right, del G naught is equal to minus NF E naught, we'll get E naught is what? Minus 2.2. E naught minus 2.2 means that is not feasible. How we can make it feasible? We have to supply an external EMF. That is the reason why we perform the electrolysis, right? We have to supply the external EMF by using a battery or a voltage source, a potential which is more than the 2.2 volt. Okay, in practical sense, we will be requiring even much higher value to drive the entire process. It's not like just you put 2.2 volt means the process will happen. We'll have to put much more, because there will be other factors also involved. But when you perform the electrolysis, right, why do we need a battery or a cell? Because the normal redox reaction, if you see, it is what? Coming as E naught value negative. How we can make it happen? By using a external battery or a voltage source. Then only this redox reaction will happen inside the electrolytic cell. But when this is happening, right, the chlorine is obtained. Where it is obtained? It is obtained at the anode. So this is important. I mean, these questions are all the questions in inorganic chemistry also, in the sense, S block. H2 will come at the cathode. And inside the solution, what is left behind? Sodium hydroxide. So these are the three products. If you perform the electrolysis of molten sodium chloride, this is what brine solution means. Sodium chloride in water. Molten sodium chloride means what? We will just have, in molten sodium chloride, what will be there? Na plus ions and Cl minus ions. So at anode, what will happen? The Cl minus ions will undergo what? Oxidation. At cathode, because there are only Na plus, right? Na plus will undergo what? Reduction. So in this case, what happens? Sodium metal will be getting formed at the cathode, and chlorine will be formed at the anode. So here we will not have any sodium hydroxide formation. Okay, so the thing is, we have seen this in our electrochemistry also. The products of the electrolysis will depend upon what is the type of electrolyte we take, obviously, right? So we take a brine solution means we will get different products. We take molten NaCl means we will get different products. But here, what is this? To obtain the non-metal, right? What is happening? Oxidation is happening. Generally, when you want to obtain the metal means reduction. While we have been using reduction every time, right? That is only in the case of the metals, metal extraction. Non-metal extraction means we have to do what? Oxidation. Now there is also, this example already we discussed, the leaching. We also call it as what? Cyanide process. Leaching of less reactive metals like gold or silver. We have used the sodium cyanide or potassium cyanide, where the gold will come into the solution by forming a cyanide complex. Now we will perform a displacement reaction by using a slightly higher reactive element like zinc. Now in the previous case, right, we said instead of using an zinc, we will go with iron. There, we were talking about the cost aspect. But sometimes, right, the overall feasibility of the reaction also will be important. So here we will go with element like zinc, because at the end of the day, what we are going to get, a more precious element like gold will come to us. Okay. So when you do the displacement reaction, right, what we will get? The gold will come out, and zinc will get into the complex. Zinc will get into the solution. So in this case, what is happening? There is both oxidation reduction. How? Second. First step, right? The gold is undergoing what? Oxidation. Because when gold is forming, look at this now. What is this? AuCN twice. Whole minus means what? The gold is in +1 stage. What is the oxidation state of gold? It is what? +1. Because the cyanide, each cyanide is what? -1, right? So how do we determine the oxidation state? Let's say gold is X. 2 cyanides are there. 2 into -1. Overall is what? -1 charge. So which means what? X minus 2 is equal to -1. So which means what? X is equal to 2 minus 1, that will be equal to what? 1 plus 1. That is the oxidation state of what? Gold. So first step is what? Oxidation. Look at the second step. Gold is now in the positive state. It is getting reduced. So here zinc is actually acting as a reducing agent. So in this case, what is happening in the cyanide process? There is both oxidation as well as reduction. Okay. Now because we are discussing about the cyanide process, there is one more. This is a little bit beyond the NCERT, and this name, right, has even come in some of the previous years also. What do we call it as? MacArthur Forest process. This is for the extraction of silver from Ag2S. Sulfide ore, first step is what? Froth flotation. Remove, the gangue and silica particles. Once we get the concentrated ore, we will digest this in sodium cyanide solution in the presence of air. Okay, I mean, we already discussed that the entire leaching will be happening at a higher rate when we are having the dissolved oxygen content more. So what will come in is we'll have a complex, a silver complex, which is coming into what solution. Now there will be a displacement reaction by using zinc powder, right? When it is added to the solution, displacement reaction will occur. So it will remove the silver from the complex, and it will be forming what? A soluble zinc complex will be formed. So what is the process called as? MacArthur Forest process. So it is the extraction of silver from the sulfide ores. So now we look at the refining. So once we get the metal extracted from the concentrated ore, the third stage of metallurgy is the refining process. So refining basically means what? Metal will be having some impurities. So we will have to remove those impurities and get the pure form of the metal. For that, right, we have some processes that are given as per the NCERT. And we will also look at one or two additional examples, the ones that have been asked in the previous years. So look at it here. What are the methods that we have? We have distillation. I mean, these words we already have some understanding in our +1, right? When we talked about the purification of organic compounds, we have talked about this distillation. Then we have liquefaction. We will see what is each of these methods. Then we have electrolysis. Then zone refining. Then we have vapor phase refining. Then there is chromatographic methods. So these are the ones that are given as per the NCERT. So we will go through them. But before we go through the details of it, right? So we need to understand one thing. Like, for which metal refining, what is the method that we will be choosing? The method that we will choose will depend on differences in the properties of the metal and the impurities. That is the basis. So what is the basis here? The basis is what is the difference between the properties of the metal and properties of the impurities. Let us say we talk about distillation. This is for a metal which has got low boiling point. Remember, even in the extraction of zinc we discussed, what is the boiling point of zinc? Nearly 920 degrees Celsius. So if you have low boiling metals like zinc or mercury, right, they can be easily evaporated. You can take the vapors and you just cool them, thereby we will be able to obtain the metal. So in case of zinc, right, if you do rapid cooling means we will get zinc dust. If you do a gradual cooling means we will get zinc in the liquid state. So the low boiling metals like zinc, mercury, we will be able to use the distillation. Similarly, if you have a metal which is having low melting point like tin, we can make this metal to flow on a sloping surface. I mean, I'll show you. Actually, the diagram is not there. Think of this as the block of impure tin. This is the block. You pass some hot air, thereby the tin which is getting melted, right, it will flow through and then it will get collected. Whereas at the top, right, you will still have all the impurities left over, because tin is able to melt easily because its melting point is less, whereas the impurities will not be able to come down, and you will see that here you will be able to collect all the molten metal. So the idea is what? If you have a metal whose melting point is totally different from the impurities. So metal should have a low melting point, impurities should be what? High melting point. Then we can use the liquefaction. Then the other method is electrolytic refining. We already know what is electrolysis. So we will take an electrolytic cell. In that we will have the molten or the electrolyte which is in the solution state. We will dip two electrodes. The negative electrode is what we will be calling as the cathode, and the positive electrode is what we will be calling as the anode. When you perform the electrolysis, basically, these two will be connected to external source, cell or a battery. When you perform the electrolysis, right, there will be reaction that will happen at the cathode and there will be reaction that will happen at the anode. About this we have discussed even in the electrolytic reduction of Al2O3, we discussed this, and electrochemistry obviously we have seen this. So here how we will be able to make use of this electrolysis for the refining process. So the way we will set up this electrolytic cell is, we will have an impure metal taken as the anode and a thin strip of the pure form of the same metal will be cathode. Means what? Generally the impure form, that will be the one that will be large. So usually what, the anode will be large, impure, and the cathode will be a thin strip, pure form. These two electrodes will be dipped in electrolytic bath containing soluble salt of the same metal, which means what? Just we are going to anyway discuss about the copper. If you have the impure copper as the anode, the pure copper thin strip as the cathode, the solution, we will take a solution that contains copper 2 plus ions, maybe CuSO4 solution like that. So when you perform the electrolysis, right, we will see what is going to happen. We will look at the example of the copper. Okay, copper will be refined by using this electrolytic refining method. So what is the anode? Anode is the impure copper. What is the cathode? Pure copper strips are taken as the cathode, just like the way we have seen in this diagram. Now maybe we can even draw it in such a way that we will be able to visualize it. So what is this? Anode is what? Impure, so it will be large. Cathode is what? Thin strip. Okay, so now we have represented them to the scale also. The electrolyte solution is what? Acidified solution of copper sulfate. So inside the solution, what we will have? Cu2 plus ions will be there. So when you look at the net result of the electrolysis, right, remember in the electrolysis discussion, which ions will get discharged will depend upon the reduction potential values. Means lower the reduction potential, difficult for reduction, so it will undergo what? Oxidation. Higher the reduction potential, it will easily undergo what? Reduction. So when you look at the electrochemical series, the ones that are at the reduction potential series, right, the ones that are at the top, they will easily undergo what? Reduction. The ones that are there at the bottom, for them it is difficult for reduction, so they will undergo what? Oxidation. So this is what we have as understanding from our electrochemistry. Now we will see what actually happens. So we will just go to the electrolytic cell itself. What happens at the anode is, we will have inside, this is the impure form, right, we will have copper. We will have also along with that some other highly reactive metals. When you take highly reactive metals, we can talk about sodium, magnesium, all these are what? Highly reactive. Even iron for that matter, all of them are what? Highly reactive than copper. And the second category is less reactive than copper, whether it is our gold or platinum, all these are what? Less reactive. So we have high reactive and we have what? Less reactive. Now along with copper, the high reactive metals, right, they also come into solution. So at the anode, what happens is these metal atoms, they will come into solution. So you see here what is going to happen at the anode, the metal will be losing electrons to form metal ions. So along with copper, the other highly reactive metals also will come into solution. Whereas the less reactive ones like gold and platinum, they will be left behind. In fact, no, they will actually be forming at the end of the electrolysis, right, they will be depositing at the bottom. Wherever you have the anode, right, they'll deposit at the bottom. So we'll call them as the anode mud. So the less basic metals, right, they'll be deposited. Now in the solution, what is there? We have of course the copper 2 plus ions that are formed. Along with that, we also have the ions of the more basic metals. More basic means what? More reactive. Now at the cathode, we will see that the copper 2 plus ions from the solution, they will get reduced to form what? Copper. In comparison to say Na plus or a Mg2 plus or a Al, all are what? Highly reactive, which will get reduced, because highly reactive metals means what? They are at the bottom, right? They will not be able to undergo reduction easily. They will be able to undergo oxidation easily, correct? So the ones that will get reduced easily are first is what? The copper. So the copper will get reduced at the cathode. Getting reduced at the cathode means what? The copper metal is going to get formed. So as a result, what is going to happen is, over a period of time, the copper from the anode is going to come out. That will come into solution. And from solution, the copper is going to be depositing. So we will see what? The cathode size will be gradually increasing. Anode side will gradually decrease. When you close the electrolysis, almost what you will see that there will be a lot of anode mud at the place of the exactly below the anode. You will have anode mud, and all the high reactive metal ions will be in the solution. The copper metal is deposited on the cathode. The cathode will now become what? Thick in terms of size. So these are the two reactions. What happens at the anode? Copper will come into the solution by forming what? Copper 2 plus ions. At the cathode, from the solution, the copper 2 plus ions will get reduced. So this is what? This is the oxidation, and this is what? This is the reduction. Okay, and the overall reaction, what you see broadly, it is like what? If you just see the snapshot initially and come and check the picture after some time, what you will be able to see, it is like the copper is moving from the anode towards the cathode. That's it. Now the impurities that we are talking about, right, the ones that are deposited at the anode as anode mud. While we may have used the word mud, it's not like it is useless. Remember, even in the other normal metallurgical process itself, right, we have been saying that anything that is coming out as effluent, we will try to use it. But here it is not like just trying to use it, just look at it. No, the anode mud, look at what all is there. We have antimony, we have selenium, we have tellurium, silver, gold, platinum. So we have like very precious metals. The anode mud is not just like some unwanted substance. It will be having what? Less basic metals than copper, means all your precious metals will be there, whether it is your silver or gold or platinum. And the thing is, industrially speaking, if you are able to recover these elements, the economy of trade will be able to cover the entire cost of the refining. Whatever is the total cost of the electrolytic refining, right, that will be taken care of by the economy that is obtained from the anode mud. So we can use the electrolytic refining for copper as well as for the zinc also. I mean, here they have just given the idea as a single point. What we will be doing, same concept. Okay, pure zinc strip will be taken as what? It will be taken as the cathode. Thick impure zinc will be taken as what? Anode. That will be kept in a solution containing what? Zinc ions, and we will perform the electrolysis. Similar phenomena will happen. So as time goes by, what we will see? We will see that at the cathode, right, all the zinc metal will be deposited. So this is how we will be able to perform the electrolytic refining method. And even sometimes this can be a possible question. what are the metals that are present in the anode mud, like that also they can give, and they can give us 4 options. Okay, so these kind of questions we should be ready with. Okay, and the reaction at the anode and reaction at the cathode. Okay, as we said, what reactions will happen at the cathode, what reactions will happen at the anode will depend upon what the reduction potential values, as we have seen in the electrochemistry, right? So if the reduction potential is higher means what? That can easily undergo reduction. If the reduction potential is less means what? Difficult for reduction, it will undergo what? Oxidation. Now the other method of refining that is used in the case of the semiconductors like silicon etc. is zone refining. Zone refining is basically on the principle that if you have impurities, right, that are more soluble in the melt, basically meaning molten state, than in the solid state of the metal. I'll tell you what happens. Okay, so we have just think of it. Okay, so we have the metal. Okay, what we are doing is we are trying to move induction coil heater through the length. So this is the this is the end 1 and this is the end 2 of the rod. You have a rod of the particular metal or the element, because we are saying even we can use it for metalloid side, that's why we can call it as metal. And we will heat it by using a induction coil which can be moved. You see here from the end 1, right, we are moving the coil. So this is where you have temporarily the molten zone. Now once you move the induction coil little bit towards the right, we just move it little bit towards the right, what happens? The molten zone will come here. So the impurities, right, I'll just mark them, the impurities will start moving along with the molten zone. So from one end we'll start, this left side we'll start. As we are moving towards the right side and right, what we'll observe? The impurities will start coming along with the molten. Wherever the induction coil is present, heater is present, right, there it will be the molten zone. We will gradually move it, means what? From one end, all the impurities will start coming into the other end. Finally, what we will do is we will not just do it once, we will do repeated number of times. And the last right side portion, right, we will just chop it off, cut it off, so that the remaining part of the rod is what? Is like almost pure. So we will be able to get really pure form of, because for the applications like the semiconductor chips and all that, we will be requiring very pure form of the semiconductors like silicon etc., germanium. So we will be able to obtain really high pure form of these elements. So in this setup, what is there? We have a noble gas atmosphere, so that there is because when you are heating it, right, it should not lead to oxidation. So this is also a possible question. Why we are creating noble gas atmosphere? Because it should not lead to oxidation. If you are heating in the presence of air, means what? That can lead to oxidation, right? That will damage everything, because we are trying to purify the metal, and in the process if you are oxidizing, it means we are going one step back. That should not be happening. Okay, so look at this. A circular mobile heater is fixed at one end of a rod of the impure. The molten zone basically moves along with the heater. Wherever the heater is there temporarily, that is where you will have the molten zone. Now as you move the heater forward, right, whatever is the behind portion of the rod will be getting cooled and it will be crystallizing. So the impurities, remember the point is what? This method is suitable only when impurities are more soluble in the melt. The impurities, as the backside part is getting crystallized, right, they will come into the melt form, because the impurities are more soluble in the melt. Now as you keep moving the heater to the right, what happens? The region of the melt phase will be moving towards the right. The impurities will start coming along with, because they are more soluble in the melt. The impurities pass on to the adjacent molten zone. As the heater is moving, the molten zone also will keep moving. That is why I said The temporary position of the molten zone is where you have the heater exactly positioned. As you move the heater, molten zone also moves. Along with that, the impurities also start coming along with it. And this process, right, like I said, it will not be done once. It will be repeated several times. And in the end, what we will do is, all the impurities will be concentrated at the, say if you are moving from left to right means, all the impurities will come to the right and right. We will just cut it off. And the remaining part of the rod is like almost pure. So where is it useful? For the semiconductors, like what? Silicon, germanium, even look at this, gallium, indium. Sometimes these kind of questions also can be asked. For which of these elements zone defining is used? What are the examples for that? We have germanium, silicon, boron, then gallium and indium. Next we have vapor phase refining. First we will have to understand, so in this we have two important named methods. One is called as the Mons process for the nickel. Then we have Van Arkel process for zirconium and titanium. These are the two examples of the vapor phase refining. So just understand what is the basis. See, every refining method is having a basis. We should have a clarity on the basis first. The basis is, if the metal can be readily converted into a volatile compound. So impure means what? You have a metal. Okay. So along with the metal you have the impurities. The thing is what? This metal should have a property where it can be easily converted into a volatile compound. What happens as a result of it? That volatile compound will just come out, which we can collect somewhere. And if this volatile compound can be decomposed, forming a volatile compound itself will not be able to help us. This volatile compound, if it is very much stable means, then that will be a problem for us, because we are trying to, again, like same previous case, right? In the previous example of the zone defining, why we are maintaining this noble gas atmosphere? Because if you don't maintain, that means you are simply heating metal. Imagine, in the presence of air, what can happen? There is a danger of oxidation, right? In the name of refining, we should not go back. Same way here also, right? You should not form the compound and leave it like that. What is our task? We should get back the pure form of metal, right? So this volatile compound should be readily decomposed. If you decompose it means what? You will get the pure metal. Look at this. What are the two conditions? The metal should form a volatile compound with, we'll see what are the reagent that we will use. But this volatile compound should be easily formed. That is one. Second thing is, by increasing temperature a little bit or something, this volatile compound should be easily decomposable, because only then we will get back the metal, right? Otherwise, it's like, we have formed a compound that is not going to help us. So let's look at the Mons process. It is for what? Nickel. These are also kind of questions. Mons process for nickel. Van Arkel is for the zirconium and titanium. In this process, right, nickel is heated in a steam of carbon monoxide. It will form a complex. So about this we will see in the coordination compounds also. Okay, so we call it as nickel tetracarbonate. So when you heat it up to the range of 330 to 350 Kelvin in the stream of carbon monoxide, what it is giving us? Complex. This will be volatile, nickel tetracarbonate. The vapors will come. And when it is subjected to a higher temperature, you see here, just from around 350, we are heating it to what? 450 to 470. The tetracarbonyl will break down to give us what? Nickel. That's how we are able to obtain the, so we formed a vapor compound, take it, collect elsewhere, and then decompose it. By just, you can see, we are kind of raising the temperature by what? Another 100 Kelvin. The volatile compound is decomposed. The Van Arkel method, right, for the zirconium and then titanium. This is useful for removing all the oxygen, nitrogen present in the impurity form. So along with the zirconium and titanium, right, we will have oxygen, nitrogen. So this can be also a possible question. I mean, we can expect. That's why we are going through the NCERT, right? So whatever the important lines or some tricky areas, we should be making a note of it. The crude metal means impure is heated in an evacuated vessel with iodine. Along with iodine, we are heating it. It will be forming what? ZrI4 if it is a zirconium. Titanium means it will be forming what? Titanium iodide. Now the iodide will be decomposed on a tungsten filament. So here we will be requiring considerably high temperature. So when you look at the temperature requirement, what is it? 1800 Kelvin. Decomposing will give us what? Zirconium. And the metal we will see that will be deposited on the filament itself. So in case of the Mons process, nickel tetracarbonyl will decompose just when you heat it to some 450 to 470 Kelvin, but it is not like that. We have to heat it up to what? 1800. That's why we are doing it on the tungsten filament, because the tungsten filament, right, when it is electrically heated, it will be able to obtain a very high temperature in the range of 1800 Kelvin. And the decomposing of the zirconium iodide, right, will allow the formation of the zirconium on the tungsten filament. It will be deposited on that. Same method for the titanium also. So zirconium and titanium, we can use the Van Arkel method. Now the next one is chromatographic methods. See, already in our +1, right, we have talked about these chromatography methods for the purification of the organic compounds. In fact, the name, right, chroma basically means what? Color. So chromatography methods basically are used to differentiate or to separate different colored pigments, and that's how the name also has come. So what is this? This is a method that is based on the, always, in our refining process, the principle is important. The principle is different components of a mixture are differently adsorbed on adsorbent. So whatever the mixture that we are trying to separate. So let's first discuss about the way the normal chromatographic method will work. Here we will take the example of the column chromatography. Okay, we'll have a mixture of these organic dye that we have to separate into different colored components. We'll put this in a liquid or a gaseous medium, and that will be moved through the adsorbent. I'll show you how a typical column chromatography will work. So we have a column chromatography setup that we will be using in industry. We'll talk about it. And we have the laboratory, normal scale. So you have that liquid into which we have put the mixture of these different dyes that will be allowed to pass through. This is what we call as the mobile phase. These wordings, right, we have seen already in our +1 also. And we'll have this column will be packed with say alumina or a silica gel, like that. That is what we will be calling as a stationary phase. Now as the entire mixture is coming down, right, the components that are adsorbed easily, they will appear at the top of the column. They are adsorbed easily, they will be at the top of the column. The ones that are not adsorbed easily, they will keep coming down. So at the bottom of the column, what you will see, the ones that are least adsorbed. And here obviously the whatever the liquid that we are using, we should get it back so that we will be able to reuse it. It's not like we are exhausting it. So we will be able to remove these. We'll have a setup column. We'll have a setup of trays. Along with the tray, we can take out this, and using a suitable solvent, right, we will be able to remove. So the particular dye component is adsorbed on the surface of the alumina or silica gel, right. You take the tray out using a suitable solvent, right. We call it as eluent. Using a suitable solvent, we will be able to remove of the colored pigment. And again, the stationary phase, the trace will be kept into the column again, so that the entire process can be redone. So this is how we will be able to look at the laboratory scale. I'll tell you what is the difference in the industry scale. Okay, the only difference will be it will happen at a larger level, and in a lab you might just have one column, but industry you might have a series of columns where the output from one column will be fed into the another column, like that. You can have a series of columns also. We'll talk about it. Okay, so let's just go through it. The different components adsorb at different levels of the column, right? They can be removed. So as I said, the tray, the portion of the trays can be taken out. They can be removed by using a suitable solvent. And we will see that these chromatography methods, right, they have got different names, but we are not going to get into the details. Already we have seen that in the +1. We'll give them gas chromatography, column chromatography. There are various names, but we are discussing only about what the column chromatography part. So the one that we can see is where you have a column that is prepared in a glass tube. The column is filled with what? Al2O3. And the moving medium, the mobile phase, right, is containing what? A solution with different components in the liquid form. And this is what we have discussed now. Okay, what is it called as column chromatography? And where this chromatography method will be useful is if you want to separate elements which are available in the minute quantities, and impurities, right, are not very different in chemical properties in comparison to the actual element. So there we will take the help of because remember what is adsorption. It is we look at it as what? A physical phenomena, right? The impurities, when they don't have too much difference with regard to the chemical properties of the element, then we'll choose this method. When we have a point, what is the point that we have to look at? The different components of that mixture. Mixture means we are talking about the impure metal here. One component of that is what? The pure metal. Other components will be what? All the impurities. So those should be getting differently adsorbed on that adsorbent. Adsorbent will be kept as a stationary phase in the column. Okay, so the example that we discussed is what? The column chromatography, where we are using the Al2O3 as the stationary phase. Now coming to the industrial scale. So you have a column, and you see here there is a pump. Okay, because laboratory means we can take the liquid out and then again drop it in the top. So here in this industry it will not happen like that, right? It will happen at a larger scale. We'll have a pump that is connected to the solvent tank. This is the liquid tank. So from here, right, the solvent is going to be pumped. The flow injector, right, is going to inject the mixture from here. It's not like we will combine them in one place. From one side, through the pump, the liquid will come. Through the flow injector, the mixture will come. These two will be added and they will be fed into the column. As they are raising through at different levels, right, the different extent of adsorption will happen. And as I said, right, this feed can be taken and it can be connected to another column, like that. We can have a series of columns also. Okay, and you can have there can be another instruments in the industrial scale. You have a flow meter. Flow meter basically talks about measuring the flow rate, and we can have specific detectors also. We don't have to get into too much of details of it, but just to understand, there will be a little bit of an more automation in that sense, and also the scale of operation will be different. Like I said, we will not just have one column, we can have a series of columns. Now the other method that is not there in the NCERT as such is, so this is an additional one, but this has come in some of the previous years, at least question based on this, is the polling. What is polling? If you have a copper or a tin, this is used for the refining of copper or tin. The impurities in that, right, will be the corresponding metal oxides itself. So what are the impurities? In copper, we'll have impurity of copper oxide itself. Same way with the tin also. So the crude metal, right, is melted and air is blasted through the melt. You can see the air. Now after the air is blown, the melt is stirred with raw wooden pole. So we are stirring this with a raw wooden pole. And sometimes we can also have a coke powder on top. What happens is the inside, whatever the portion of the wooden pole that is inside, will be only partially burnt, and that will give rise to what? Because the wooden pole is after all made up of hydrocarbons, right? It will be giving rise to what? Carbon and carbon monoxide. And this carbon or carbon monoxide will react with the metal oxide. That is the impurity there, right? And thereby that will be able to form what? The metal. And as a result, we will be getting what? Carbon dioxide, which will be eventually coming out as a effluent. So we are able to convert whatever the metal oxide impurity into what? The metal form, and that will be able to yield as the refined metal. So where do we use the method? It is used when the impurity is present in the metal or the oxides of the metal itself. The unburnt state of the wooden pole that is inserted in, used for stirring, right? The carbon or carbon monoxide coming from that are used for reducing the metal oxide into metal. That's it. This is what is the polling. Now coming to the uses of some of these important metals, we talk about aluminum, copper, zinc and iron. Even in this we will also discuss about the alloys. So alloys means it is not a separate section. We will discuss about the alloys as we go through these metals, because what is alloy? It is a metal and metal mixture, right? Aluminum foils, right, they are used as wrappers in chocolates and various other food items. Nowadays we are not using it, okay, because of the harmful effects the aluminum can have in the food chain. Now the fine dust of the aluminum, right, can be used in paints as well as lacquers. I'm sure we know what is the lacquer, right? It will be the one that will be used to coat on the surface of the wood, etc. Aluminum, since it is a very highly electropositive metal, it is also used in the thermite process. Thermite process is what? The extraction of even iron also, we can, the reduction basically, iron, chromium, manganese, their oxides, right, can be reduced by using aluminum. What do you call it as? Thermite process. Wires of aluminum can be used as electricity conductors because it is a good conductor of electricity. And because aluminum is light, the alloys of light, right, they are used for making lightweight body parts of aeroplanes, etc. Coming to copper, right, this is where we can expect question. Aluminum is more general, we may not be able to expect many questions. Copper, of course, we know, electrical wires, it's all made up of what? Copper. And it is also used for making steam pipes. And copper is a constituent of various important alloys. Brass, what does brass contain? Copper, zinc. Bronze contains what? Copper, tin. Coinage alloy, it contains what? Copper and nickel. So what is the coinage alloy? That is the alloy that is used for the making of coins. Zinc, right, we know it is used for galvanizing iron, that will prevent the rusting of iron. And zinc is also used in batteries. So we have seen this in our electrochemistry chapter also, right? And what are the alloys where zinc will come? Brass, it's copper with zinc, right? Look at the composition, copper is 60, zinc is what? 40. German silver, what is the composition? So these compositions are also important. Sometimes we can expect very, very straightforward questions. While we have discussed so much about the process, etc., right? If you see in JEE mains a question saying, what is the composition of the German silver, you are not able to mark it appropriately, that's it gone. So that is the reason why we are going through the NCERT as it is. German silver, what is the composition? Copper 25 to 30, zinc 25 to 30, nickel is what, 40 to 50. Zinc dust, we know it is used as a reducing agent. In various reactions, we will use this zinc dust as the reducing agent. Coming to iron, right? So iron, we talk about what? Cast iron. Cast iron can be used, for casting stove, railway sleepers, gutter pipes, toys. Okay. And cast iron, we know it is used in the manufacture of the wrought iron. Wrought iron can be also called as what? It can be also called as the malleable iron. So wrought iron is used for making what? Anchors, wires, bolt, chain, agricultural implement. So these are all the places where we will be using the wrought iron. Steel, for the booming of development of a country, right? One thing that is very much required is steel, because it is the backbone for the construction industry. Not just construction, but various other industries, because steel finds applications from each and every activity that we see in our daily life. The thing is, we have various types of steels. To suit the requirement, the composition of the steel will be changing. Okay, so steel as such, we have a lot of applications, but alloy steel, right? What is it? It is a method in which we will be able to obtain a steel along with a particular metal, like nickel steel, right? It is used for making cables, automobiles, aeroplanes, because nickel steel, adding nickel, right, will bring certain specific properties. You can see, pendulum, measuring tapes, all this is because these can be possible questions are the applications of the nickel steel. Then we have chrome steel. Basically, we will add chromium, used for what? Cutting tools, crushing machines. Stainless steel, as we know already, it is what? The one that is used for making of cycles, automobiles, utensils, pen. Lot of these things are made up of what? Stainless steel. So if you look at, right, what each of these elements will bring, if you have phosphorus, it imparts what? Low tensile strength and brittleness. Manganese, right, it imparts what? Hardness, and it basically increases the tensile strength. Like the railroad, right, that will basically be requiring very high tensile strength, and typically it contains what? 13% of manganese. Then chromium or nickel, right, it imparts stainless characteristic, means what? It will produce impervious coating. The coating cannot be penetrated. Okay, so that is what the chromium or nickel will do. Then we have nitrogen. It makes the steel brittle. Carbon, right, it improves the hardness and strength. We can see, in different types of steel, right? Mild steel, what is the percentage? These are all little bit additional. This is addition to what we have in NCERT. Just giving you an idea. Medium steel means what? 0.3 to 0.6 in terms of percentage. High carbon steel, right? Then we have tool steel, which is what? 0.8 to 1% in terms of carbon. So what is it? Steel, this is a possible question. Steel contains, we will treat this as an alloy. It contains a non-metal. What is the non-metal that we are referring to here? Carbon. Generally alloys means what? Metal-metal mixtures, right? But steel contains what? Carbon. Then there are some important wordings related to the steel. Even in some of the past years, right, these wordings based questions have come. Annealing, what is it? You have a hard steel, heat it to around 700 800. These numbers will not be important, just the process. Hard steel, you heat it, then allow it to cool to the room temperature very, very slowly. Then what happens is the hard steel becomes soft. So annealing means what? Annealing basically means making hard steel into soft. Then exactly we have the reverse, quenching. What is it? Soft steel you take, heat it to the bright redness and cool this suddenly by immersing this into water or oil, then the steel becomes what? Hard and brittle. What is known as quenching. So quenching means what? Soft steel to what? Hard and brittle. Then we have tempering. The hard and brittle steel, right? We will heat it to what? 200 to 300 and cool this very slowly to the room temperature. As a result, what happens? The brittleness will disappear, but the hardness will remain as it is. So tempering, what you are doing, we get hard and brittle from the quenching. You let it go through the tempering process. The brittleness will disappear, but the hardness will stay as it is. What is the process called as tempering? Then we have nitriding. The mild steel, right, which contains 1% aluminum, we will be heating it to what? Around 550 degrees Celsius in the presence of ammonia. In this process, what happens is there will be a layer of the nitride formation, the nitrides of iron and aluminum forming on the surface. And this, makes the surface to be very hard. So this is used for the making of the borewell drilling equipment you see, right? Okay, so that components are basically made up of what? The mild steel on which you will perform the nitriding. These are some of the important, so basically what is the idea of nitriding? Just when you take the mild steel and heat it up to 550 in the presence of ammonia, right, we will form a nitride layer of iron and aluminum, that's it. That is what is bringing the hardness to the surface. The other important thing is about the amalgam. So amalgam is what? It's a metal with mercury, that is what is amalgam. In this we have gold and silver amalgam. They are used for the filling of dental cavity. Tin amalgam, right, it is used for the silvering of the mirrors. We talk about in physics also, you will talk a lot about it. Mirrors, different types of mirrors. You will say this is what? A concave mirror. You will say this is a convex mirror. Silvering, right, the backside coating is done by using what? Tin amalgam. Even we have the sodium amalgam that is used for decreasing the reactivity of the sodium. Normally sodium will be highly reactive, right? So by having an amalgam, we will be able to reduce the reactivity of the sodium. Now just to summarize some of the metals and their extraction process, we have aluminum. So what are the ores? We have bauxite, Al2O3 hydrated aluminum oxide and cryolite. What is the extraction? It is the electrolytic reduction. So Al2O3 dissolved in cryolite. Along with that, we also add CaF2. So CaF2 will one decrease the melting point of the mixture and also increase the electrical conductivity. Okay. So for the extraction, right, we will require a good electricity source because it is after all electrolytic reduction. Iron, we have what? Hematite and magnetite. These are the two ores. So what happens in blast furnace, right? We will see the reduction in the low temperature zone. Reduction will be happening through CO, carbon monoxide. High temperature zone, it will be the coke reduction. So we will require a very high temperature inside the blast furnace. Of course, in the blast furnace, what you see is the temperature at the combustion zone will be nearly 2200 Kelvin. As you keep going up, the temperature will reduce. Then for the copper, right, we have copper pyrites, CuFeS2, copper glans, Cu2S, malachite. What is malachite? CuCO3.CuOH twice, cuprite, Cu2O. All these are the ores. So here, in case of copper sulfide ores, what happens is the self-reduction. So we'll have one, the reverberatory furnace, where we will have the sulfide ore getting converted into copper matte. So what is copper matte? Mainly Cu2S and some small amount of FeS, copper sulfide and iron sulfide. The copper matter will be fed into, they have not given the name in the NCERT, so what do we call this? They are saying it's a specially designed converter. What is it called as? Bessemer converter. That will have, already we have discussed it, but just to summarize, that will have a lining of silica also. In this Bessemer converter, what happens? The self reduction. Okay, so we will not be able to use any reducing agent here. We will be having what? Self reduction of the copper. And also we have the hydrometallurgy. What is it? The sulfuric acid leaching is used, where we will be able to obtain the copper from the low grade ores of the copper. Okay, so what is it? It is the hydrometallurgy. I mean, the hydrometallurgy basically we can use for the obtaining of copper, right? Even we can use slightly higher reactive metals like iron or zinc also. And even we have discussed about why we will rather prefer iron than zinc in terms of the cost aspect, because while the displacement reaction of copper with zinc may be more feasible, but in terms of the economics, right, it is better to do it with the iron, because iron will be relatively cheaper. For the zinc, right, we have the common ores are what? Sphalerite, zinc blende, ZnS, calamine, ZnCO3, and zincite. So here we will have the coke reduction. First, what is it? Sulfide ore will be roasted, we will get what? Zinc oxide. And then we will have a coke reduction, but at a temperature higher than what is required for copper. Maybe you can just go back and check what is the reason for that. The metal that is obtained, right, we can purify it by using what? Distillation, because zinc will have a lower boiling point, 920 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this is about a quick summary of the metallurgical process of four common metals: aluminum, iron, copper, and zinc. So with this, right, we'll conclude the metallurgy chapter, and hope this is useful. We'll see in one more chapter. All the very best.